The same thing. It's from my laptop, I think.
Hello and welcome to Global South World Live. We are speaking to you as a meeting is expected to start right now we don't know if we're going to get access to see some of that, but in the White House between Donald Trump and one of his most critical opponents, Gustavo Petro of Colombia. Now, these two have been at loggerheads really ever since Donald Trump began bombing boats off the Colombian coast, Venezuelan boats, which he said were bringing drugs over to America. That was, according to most observers, contrary to international law. The Colombian president spoke out very much in support of his neighbor, Nicolas Maduro, which was quite controversial because those two countries haven't always seen eye to eye, but he was very critical of Trump's actions. And in response to that, Trump had some very strong words to say about him as well. So their meeting today at the White House will be interesting. We don't know whether we're going to get fireworks, whether we're going to get a repeat of the famous Zelensky meeting, but we're here and we're going to keep you informed and we're going to let you know. So Ishmael, what do people need to know ahead of this meeting?
Well, Gustavo Petro is very popular in South America because he's also very important when it comes to Colombia and his support for the other American nations. And being a big critic of Trump, who had to picked up Maduro, that is something that the other countries are really not happy about. Gustavo Petro was elected in 2022, and he is a liberal social reformist who is speaking for the people, and he is fighting for social democracy. And he was a part of the M19 group, which is an underground student movement named after the April 1970 election, where there was some rigging believed to have been done by the Liberal and then the Conservatives Party, which is the National Front, made up of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, communists, and then the National Liberation Army, ELN, and they came together with the conservatives, creating the National Front, and they did not allow other parties like the ANAPO, which is a National Popular Alliance, which is fed up of the two-party system between the two. And Colombia has a very rich history, and Gustavo Petro is from that history. He is a student of politics. He is also an economist and is somebody who really is liberal, but he calls his liberal since his childhood when he was in school, liberal theology. He says he's not a Marxist. However, he speaks for social democracy. And we've seen that in how he speaks openly about things that are not really in line with what he believes in. We've seen the love that Colombians have for him. We've seen how he is cheered on when Trump is speaking against Colombia and against other countries. And we could see that also in the fight he had with Trump, where he called him so many names. And Trump, the US government, current government, is not really happy about that. But as you said, the question is, are we going to see a Zelensky? Well, others are also asking, are we going to see a Mamdani? Because when Mamdani, who is also a critic of Trump, visited the White House, he came out smiling and they were all looking like friends. And we don't know if that's going to happen. It's quite weird not to have cameras in there because for all the visits that have happened in the White House, we see cameras, we see just a few minutes of the discourse, and we see if there's tension or not. However, now there are no cameras. We don't know if there's tension in there. We don't know how it's going to end up. We don't know exactly the direction of that
Yeah.
conversation. However, just a phone call is very important because a phone call from Trump to Colombia, that is quite iconic.
Yeah, that was on January the 3rd, wasn't it? And it resolved the kind of immediate tensions that were going on where the two were really fighting each other. Now, Petro's in quite a good situation, really, because he doesn't have much pressure on him. He can't run again in elections. His term's due to end in August. So if this meeting turns into a fight, that probably suits him. It probably helps potentially his chosen successor in the polls because it will show, his party standing up to Trump. if he manages to do a deal with America, he will prove that the left in Colombia can work with the US, can become a partner of the US. That looks good for him too. So there's lots of suggestions that this meeting is a win-win for him. What I'd like to do is just go back into the history a little bit and just hear some of those comments that the two were making before they made up on that January the 3rd. So let's take a quick listen.
Have you considered talking to the president of Colombia, who you call a drug dealer?
No, I haven't really thought too much about him. He's been fairly hostile to the United States, and I haven't given him a lot of thought. He's going to have himself some big problems if he doesn't wise up. Colombia is producing a lot of drugs. They have cocaine factories that they make cocaine, as you know, and they sell it right into the United States. So he better wise up, or he'll be next. He'll be next too. And I hope he's listening. He's going to be next.
So yeah, Trump says, I hope he's listening. He's going to be next. That was obviously following the attack on Venezuela that led to Nicolas Maduro being taken into U.S. custody. And you know, that's some pretty strong language from one head of state to another, basically threatening to kidnap them. Petro, though, wasn't wanting to take it lying down, so he's reacted on a couple of occasions. Here's one of them.
Quien cumplió con los requisitos establecidos para tal efecto. Por segunda vez.
Y aquí estamos siendo amenazados. Y a Colombia no se le amenaza. Porque cuánta sangre de ustedes o de la Policía Nacional y de los colombianos del común y de los que no son del común, porque cuántos líderes de este país no han muerto en manos del narcotráfico. Como para que nos vengan a decir hoy que es que no estamos luchando contra el narcotráfico y aquí hay un cartel de los soles.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Como seres humanos se dialoga, no bajo amenaza. Que aquí hemos puesto sangre por litros. ¿Cuánta sangre sería? Nadie ha calculado eso, terrible número. Sangre y sangre por luchar contra el narcotráfico desde hace medio siglo. Para que los berracos gringos no se metan tanta cocaína en la cabeza. Y entonces las gracias son un insulto. No, no tienen por qué insultarnos. Allá no han muerto, aquí sí. 1 millón de latinoamericanos muertos desde hace medio siglo es en esas guerras que ha desatado las mafias creadas por prohibir. Y entonces han empoderado a las mafias.
So yeah, I mean, some very strong points being made there by Petro, talking about how people in his country have been dying in this war on drugs, so that, as he said, to stop Americans stuffing cocaine into their faces. And the thanks, he says, that they've got from America has been just insults. And you can see that level of anger there when he's talking about people dying. But of course, Donald Trump would say that Americans have been dying, that thousands of Americans are dying because of drugs that are imported from other countries. And that, you know, these leaders in South America are not doing enough to stop this flow, and that often, you know, Trump would claim they're even in league with some of these drug dealers and these mafias, a point that Petro there very much denied.
Well, if we want to look at the backgrounds of the two leaders, for Petro is somebody who really knows politics and has been in the game for a long time, from a rebel leader to being in the lead with the leftist party, and also being president in 2022, and also being in parliament in Colombia. That alone tells you he knows what really is going on there. He knows how to speak. He knows how to react to issues. And now let's look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump has been caught so many times saying things that are not political, and saying things that are not, factual. And these have happened so many times. Sometimes you can't also say whatever he's going to say. You don't know if he really means it, because there are times he said, well, we're going after Maduro. we're getting him. A lot of people didn't expect that. And I'm sure over 90 people didn't expect it. But it happened. So if he says, hey, you guys are creating problems in America, is it one of just the hot air is blowing, or is just a serious, real, true information is putting out there? And unfortunately, the American media is not doing much to give us the actual truth, the actual perspective, because the US has the biggest security agencies. It has the FBI, the CIA, all of them play a role in getting those who bring in cocaine. And what are their documents saying? Are they really getting the cocaine from Colombia? And is Colombia really playing a role in getting it all through the United States? Is Colombia to blame for the dying, the killing, and then the death of so many people in America?
Yeah, and the facts would say that Colombia is the biggest producer of cocaine in the world, but of course, it's not primarily cocaine which is killing Americans. That is fentanyl. And, the fentanyl is primarily being brought in from Mexico, not from Colombia. Sometimes it is mixed with cocaine. That is certainly true. But it is, it is a more complex dynamic than perhaps drugs are killing this many Americans. And therefore, if Colombia gets its act together as the biggest drug producer, it would fix it. Let's have another listen, Ishmael, now to some other comments that Donald Trump made. Again, very, very typical of him. And this is back at the start of last month.
Mr. President, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a couple weeks ago, he said he's got to watch his ass. And today he said he's not concerned about anything happening to him in the aftermath of this operation. So just what your message is about that.
Well, he has cocaine mills. He has factories where he makes cocaine. And yeah, I think I stick by my first statement. He's making cocaine. They're sending it into the United States. So he does have to watch his ass.
So Ishmael, I'm looking at the live stream from the White House, and there isn't too much going on there. We can see the journalists gathered outside. There's certainly quite a large crowd of them. This is obviously a big event, but there's no sign of Petro or Trump outside the White House. We assume that they are inside talking, and we may or may not get a feed of them afterwards in a press conference, I guess, depending how well the meeting goes. They may decide to talk publicly or not. So that was Donald Trump threatening to kick the ass of Petro back in January. But of course, Petro's not one to take that lying down. He's given his own response as well. This is back from December.
Trump es un hombre muy desinformado de Colombia. Es una lástima porque desecha el país que más sabe de tráfico de cocaína. Parece que sus interlocutores lo engañan por completo.
Toneladas equivalen más o menos a unos 32.000.
Son 2.700 toneladas de cocaína incautadas por mi gobierno. Hasta ahora. Se está haciendo va a terminar el año 2025 y todavía nos quedan meses del 26, así que vamos a aproximarnos a 4.000 toneladas. La mayor incautación de la historia del mundo. No hay un récord de estos atrás.
Día cada 40 minutos se destruye uno.
Cada 40. Esa desinformación terrible hacia el presidente de los Estados Unidos lo lleva a frases y acciones que no se pueden ejercer sobre un presidente elegido democráticamente por la mayoría de la sociedad colombiana. Así se irrespeta esa Colombia. Tengo opiniones diferentes a las políticas del gobierno estadounidense sobre Palestina, migrantes, Caribe, Venezuela y la eficacia de la lucha contra las mafias. En una democracia global tengo derecho a expresarlas y controvertir. Si me demuestran con datos mi equivocación, puedo corregir. Por eso ya no espero que me inviten a Washington, sino que Trump venga a Colombia a ver qué son laboratorios de cocaína, cómo se destruyen 9 al día. Y cómo incautamos drogas por decenas de toneladas todos los días. Pero no es cierto que con misiles sobre lancheros se está luchando contra narcoterroristas. cuando los lancheros son gente pobre y cuando no hay mar internacional en el Caribe, yo quiero aquí la Cancillería que mire esto, porque nosotros tenemos fronteras de nuestro mar territorial con los países, las islas que siguen, y los países de Centroamérica. ¿Dónde hay mar internacional, ministro, en el Caribe? Donde se ponga y donde caiga un misil es el mar de alguien. Y la mayor parte de ese mar es colombiano.
So, if you're just joining us, that was President Gustavo Petro back in December, talking about his concerns in a very angry way, really, about the way that Donald Trump had dealt with the situation off the coast of his country, in bombing boats, which he said were carrying drugs, and explaining what he felt was the efforts that Colombia had been taking. He said Trump was very badly informed about what was actually happening there and wasn't seeing the true picture. You are watching Global South World. We are live ahead of Donald Trump's meeting with Gustavo Petro of Colombia. Ishmael.
Well, according to sources close to the meeting, Colombian officials plan to deliver a detailed presentation on their main anti-drug achievements, including cocaine seizure figures, according to sources. And looking at what Gustavo said in December, he is still talking about facts and about proving that indeed Colombia is the hotbed of cocaine, even though we know they produce the most cocaine, but is that cocaine getting to the US directly without any any efforts by the Colombian authorities? Also, news coming in says a high-level drug trafficking leader has been extradited to the US from Colombia. And this is from Colombia's defense minister. And it clashes with the fact that the Colombian president is in the US right now. And you can see clearly from the information coming up and the development that Colombia is really trying to prove to the US that they are not what Trump is saying they are. And the Colombia's defense minister, Pedro Arnolfo Sanchez Suarez, he announced that a high-level drug trafficking leader wanted by the US justice system has been extradited, and that's the name they gave him, an alias, is Pipe Tulua, and the real name wasn't given, but the extradition has already happened, and I understand is already on the US wanted list, and the official said the extradition was conducted in coordination with US Marshal Service and the Drug Enforcement Administration, saying it showed bilateral cooperation being delivered by the two countries. And clearly there is a kind of amicable settlement, if I would say, for or by the Colombian authorities. Yeah. So the US is working hand in hand with them. So clearly the solution is what everyone wants. However, the wind that's blowing before the storm is the problem. The issues that they are saying and all the information that's going back and forth is the problem. And it's keeping people on the edge of their seats. But there's a real job that needs to be done, which is tie all loose ends in both countries.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting what you say, that there has been some progress with the extradition there, because that cooperation between the US and Colombia never really stopped. I mean, there were lots of threats that it might stop. The US did designate Colombia as not doing as effective a job as it should be, again, in fighting drugs. But the agencies carried on working together. Last week, I think it was, Petro did accept a deportation flight from the US, something, again, he's been very critical of, is the American treatment of migrants. But again, that shows a little bit, I think, of an olive branch. He has called on the Americans to help do more by attacking the sources of finance of the drug cartels and perhaps extraditing some of the leaders who are overseas back to Colombia. But it's clear that this war on drugs can't just be done by one country. It needs to be done in cooperation.
Yeah, it's very clear. And currently, journalists around the meeting are very unclear as to how it's going to go up, because everybody's questioning why is that this one is different. And clearly, the issue at hand, which is the drug issue, the cocaine issue, is very delicate and very complex. And any word that goes out wrongly might affect the fight against the drugs in both Colombia and in the United States. So imagine Trump says something that could inflate some anger in Colombia, that would even affect the efforts of the US security agencies. And that will make things very difficult. We've already seen the accusations going back and forth. We've already seen how Colombians are uneasy as to what may happen to them next. But clearly, it's going to be a good news, I believe, because if the two of them have agreed to sit and have a discussion in private, then definitely they're going to be very delicate issues discussed, and we're going to get very good news. So hoping they'll come out and speak to the press and then give us some feedback as to what they've agreed on.
Yeah, we will find out shortly, I think, whether that press conference does actually happen. The other element, of course, is what's going on in Venezuela, because you mentioned earlier the ELN, which is a guerrilla group which operates on that border area between Colombia and Venezuela, often seen as allied to the Venezuelan authorities, accused of laundering cash through the Venezuelan military. The suggestion has been that the Venezuelan military have been protecting them. Colombia have often been fighting them quite aggressively, sometimes more than others, it has to be said. But what will happen now that America, according to Donald Trump, is running Venezuela? Will they be able to tackle that group, which again could pose a big threat to Donald Trump's plans to bring in oil companies, American oil companies, to bolster the Venezuelan economy? Because if there are guerrilla groups there capable of carrying out kidnappings, carrying out attacks against this kind of infrastructure, American oil companies are not going to want to invest. So again, both sides there have a common interest, I think, in tackling this group. But can they do it on the ground, where the Venezuelan military have very, very long-running and close ties with the ELN guerrillas?
Well, that's a very important observation, because for the US, they have all the arms and everything, but the laws are not on their side. And the US may try this. However, how have they managed the issues in their own country? This comes, political discussions and also the whole issue about diplomacy comes to play. We saw the Nigerian attack, which was supported by the US on terrorists in Nigeria, and we saw how it ended. It didn't stop them. The US helped to fire the bombs into the terrorist area. People were killed, and a few people have been rescued. But right now, is a Nigerian army that's on the ground doing the work. But let's bring it to the situation of Venezuela. How is it going to be like? Can the US or Venezuelan authorities allow the US to just come in? Because normally some of these attacks end up with some casualties. You get people who are not part of the whole cartels, and they are not part of the gangs and the militia, but they end up getting, attacked and getting injured and being killed by some of these attacks. So the US take blame for it. The US historically has been part of a lot of operations in some of these regions in the past, and we've seen how badly it's been for the government of all the presidents that were involved, including Barack Obama, and in Libya, we've seen George Bush in Iraq and Iran and other places. We've seen all these presidents, and now Donald Trump is going into countries without any major security implications to the US, but it's just more political, because by speaking about these issues, he just adds what they need. And what they need is to have access, to have control, to also get American companies in there. Well, that tactic doesn't really solve the situation. It makes it murky.
Sorry, Ishmael, I think I just lost you briefly there. But just a reminder to everyone watching, we are here a bit ahead of, or while Donald Trump and Gustavo Petro meet inside the White House. Those two old adversaries. Looks like there's some evidence they've made up from recently developments, some concessions that have been made by Colombia towards accepting deportation flights, extraditing a drug dealer to the US, talking in a more conciliatory manner about their relationship with the US. Just watching the live stream, I can see there is a Marine guard standing outside the White House door. The members of the press corps are still there, although we have been told that at the moment there is no press conference planned. That might change, I think, depending how the meeting goes. You are here with Global South World. So Ishmael, one of the key things that's been going on here is this kind of ideological division in Latin America. You've pointed out that Petro is very much from the left of that positioning. Obviously, Donald Trump very much on the right. Donald Trump particularly close to Latin American leaders on the right. Obviously, Javier Milei in Argentina, and that politics has played a part in this. But there's more to it than that as well, isn't there? Because Donald Trump very much frames this as what he calls the Don Roe doctrine, talking back to what was the Monroe Doctrine from the 19th century, where America said, look, this whole continent is part of our sphere of influence. We need to control what's going on. We cannot have adversaries, people who are hostile to us in Latin America. And that's very much the position that we've seen him adopting recently.
That's right. And we have the midterms coming soon. And President Trump is now getting closer to the leftists. And we've already seen the US government reaching out to the Sahel states that came together, being run by the military, and that's Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. And they were so excited that, hey, the US is calling us to the table to have a conversation. And the question is why? Well, elections are around the corner. Besides elections, the US may need more allies because the allies right now are still not happy because of all these visa restrictions, hoping that the visa restrictions could get everybody to align, everyone to do exactly what the US wants to do. And now the US is giving other countries an alternative. They are giving them ideas as to coming together and uniting in their own front. We've seen a lot of global South regions going towards the BRICS. We've seen also Africa, especially, creating, their own blocks and making it more stronger. We saw at the World Economic Forum the Accra Reset, which was chaired by the Ghana's president, John Mahama, bringing together some global South nations to come together and work together and trade together, so they wouldn't have to rely on the US and other Western countries when it comes to their development. And this is good for them. However, is it good for the US? If these countries come together and support each other and may not need the US, then who is the US going to trade with? Right now in Canada, for instance, the US is not too happy because Canada is smiling with China. France is smiling with China. And the US is the cause of it because the US made them realize that they could lose everything if they want to go play the big boss in politics. And the US is playing the big boss. Now China is getting an opportunity to deal and trade with all these other countries that may want to survive for a longer time. Also, Russia is trying to find its way into these politics, and it's working out. It's working out. So the US has a lot to lose, and now they are reconsidering having conversations than throwing bombs and also speaking against democratically elected governments.
Yeah, and to remind to all the audience, we've got a lot of people watching right now. Do leave anything in the comments if you have anything you want to add, any contributions you want to make, any questions you want to ask me or Ishmael. Just going back to Ishmael's point there, we've seen the dollar falling, we've seen gold rising, and that is a sign of the world financial system changing, moving a little bit away from America. But as we wait for Donald Trump and Gustavo Petro, any news from that meeting between the two, let's perhaps catch up on a bit of the banter, let's call it, that the two of them had back a month or so ago when they were really at loggerheads about what was going on in Venezuela, and they were throwing some very choice phrases between each other. This is Donald Trump, of course.
Have you considered talking to the president of Colombia, who you call a drug dealer?
No, I haven't really thought too much about him. He's been fairly hostile to the United States, and I haven't given him a lot of thought. He's going to have himself some big problems if he doesn't wise up. Colombia is producing a lot of drugs. They have cocaine factories that they make cocaine, as you know, and they sell it right into the United States. So he better wise up, or he'll be next. He'll be next too. And I hope he's listening. He's going to be next.
Yeah, so I hope he's listening. He's going to be next. That was what Donald Trump was saying about Petro back in December. Of course, there are sanctions on the Colombian president. Those have been waived to allow him to come to the US for this meeting today. But it's quite extraordinary that, back in December, Trump was threatening basically to kidnap this guy, and now he's welcoming him to a meeting in the White House. Let's have a listen now to the kind of rhetoric that was going the other way, because this was not a one-way show. Colombia was not sort of sitting down and trying to appease Donald Trump as maybe some of the European countries have. Certainly there's no idea of Gustavo Petro referring to Trump as daddy. Let's listen to what he did call him.
Quien cumplió con los requisitos establecidos para tal efecto. Por segunda vez.
Y aquí estamos siendo amenazados. Y a Colombia no se le amenaza. Porque cuánta sangre de ustedes o de la Policía Nacional y de los colombianos del común y de los que no son del común, porque cuántos líderes de este país no han muerto en manos del narcotráfico. Como para que nos vengan a decir hoy que es que no estamos luchando contra el narcotráfico y aquí hay un cartel de los soles.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Como seres humanos se dialoga, no bajo amenaza. Que aquí hemos puesto sangre por litros. ¿Cuánta sangre sería? Nadie ha calculado eso, terrible número. Sangre y sangre por luchar contra el narcotráfico desde hace medio siglo. Para que los berracos gringos no se metan tanta cocaína en la cabeza. Y entonces las gracias son un insulto. No tienen por qué insultarnos. Allá no han muerto, aquí sí. 1 millón de latinoamericanos muertos desde hace medio siglo es en esas guerras que ha desatado las mafias creadas por prohibir. Y entonces han empoderado a las mafias.
So yes, there we were just listening to Gustavo Petro, who is, back in December was railing against the US, threatening his country, pointing out the amount of lives that had been lost in the fight against drugs. Very, very critical of Donald Trump. And today he is meeting the US president in the White House, as I said, having had his sanctions waived so that he could travel to America.
Yeah. So that's quite interesting. And the meeting is about to happen. We've seen that of Zelensky. We've seen that of so many other leaders, even some African leaders as well. It didn't look like...
Ramaphosa, that was a very big one, wasn't it? Again, ambushed by Donald Trump. He'd obviously gone to cause a scene, and he'd invited the press in, made sure it was very public. Now, of course, today, we don't have any sign that this is going to be open to the press. We don't even know if there's going to be a press conference, which maybe is a suggestion that it's going to be a little bit more conciliatory and diplomatic.
Yes, and if you look at the personalities of the two leaders involved, for Ramaphosa, for instance, he's a soft-spoken person. For Zelensky, he was a little bit the guy who needs the US. So these are different circumstances. But for Petro is very, very assertive, just like Trump. And I don't think the two of them are going to lay low for the other to maybe speak over them. So definitely this needs not to be on camera, but we would have loved to see it on camera so that we can see who tones down and also who takes the bait, if there is any. And we've seen that with the Mamdani one, who is an American. And Donald Trump was very receptive and warm and welcoming. And he even said he was his friend. He called him his friend. But he didn't call Zelensky his friend. There was a lot of, issues with that. He was very hostile, I would say, to Zelensky. That's the vice president France. And then for the South African president Ramaphosa, it was also a very heavy one. And the friendship is still not there. they've still not sorted out the issue between South Africa and the United States. And South Africa thinks, well, they can do without the US. And it looks like they are doing so well. They have Russia, they have India, they have Brazil, and they all make up the BRICS nations. And they've opened up BRICS for others to also join. And they could do better with some of these countries.
Yeah, yeah. So as we mentioned, the global paradigms are changing almost day to day, and we've seen that, in the change of rhetoric as well that's been going on between Trump and Petro. And I mean, we showed some clips earlier. Let's look at another one. This is very typical Donald Trump, threatening to kick his ass, which is something you don't often hear on the diplomatic stage.
Mr. President, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a couple weeks ago, he said he's got to watch his ass. And today he said he's not concerned about anything happening to him in the aftermath of this operation. So just what your message is about that.
Well, he has cocaine mills. He has factories where he makes cocaine. And yeah, I think I stick by my first statement. He's making cocaine. They're sending it into the United States. So he does have to watch his ass.
Yeah, watch his ass. And, this was very typical of a long running dispute between the two men, back and forward, all kinds of insults. This was how Petro responded to Trump. He's basically saying that he was ignorant.
Trump es un hombre muy desinformado de Colombia. Es una lástima porque desecha el país que más sabe de tráfico de cocaína. Parece que sus interlocutores lo engañan por completo.
Toneladas equivalen más o menos a unos 32.000.
Son 2.700 toneladas de cocaína incautadas por mi gobierno. Hasta ahora. Se está haciendo va a terminar el año 2025 y todavía nos quedan meses del 26, así que vamos a aproximarnos a 4.000 toneladas. La mayor incautación de la historia del mundo. No hay un récord de estos atrás.
Día cada 40 minutos se destruye uno.
Cada 40. Esa desinformación terrible hacia el presidente de los Estados Unidos lo lleva a frases y acciones que no se pueden ejercer sobre un presidente elegido democráticamente por la mayoría de la sociedad colombiana. Así se irrespeta esa Colombia. Tengo opiniones diferentes a las políticas del gobierno estadounidense sobre Palestina, migrantes, Caribe, Venezuela y la eficacia de la lucha contra las mafias. En una democracia global tengo derecho a expresarlas y controvertir. Si me demuestran con datos mi equivocación, puedo corregir. Por eso ya no espero que me inviten a Washington, sino que Trump venga a Colombia a ver qué son laboratorios de cocaína, cómo se destruyen 9 al día y cómo incautamos drogas por decenas de toneladas todos los días. Esto iba largo y lo pasé. Pero no es cierto que con misiles sobre lancheros se está luchando contra narcoterroristas. Cuando los lancheros son gente pobre y cuando no hay mar internacional en el Caribe, yo quiero aquí la Cancillería que mire esto. Porque nosotros tenemos fronteras de nuestro mar territorial con los países, las islas que siguen, y los países de Centroamérica. ¿Dónde hay mar internacional, ministro, en el Caribe? Donde se ponga y donde caiga un misil es el mar de alguien. Y la mayor parte de ese mar es colombiano.
Yeah, so President Gustavo Petro there of Colombia saying actually that he didn't want to go to the US. He wanted Donald Trump to come to Colombia and to see how his country was fighting the war on drugs, because of course the US had been very critical of the actions of Colombia, saying they weren't doing a good enough job. You are here with us on Global South World. We are waiting to hear the latest news from the meeting between Donald Trump and Gustavo Petro. So, Ishmael, what is the latest? You were saying that there's been some news about a drug dealer being extradited to the US from Colombia.
Yes, so a drug dealer who has not been named, he was given a nickname that's Pipe Tulua. And this was announced by Colombia's Defense Minister Pedro Arnolfo Sanchez Suarez. And he said this high level drug trafficking leader was already wanted by the US justice system, and now he's been extradited to the US. He said the extradition was conducted in coordination with the US Marshal Service and the Drug Enforcement Administration, saying it showed bilateral cooperation being delivered through measurable results against transnational crime. And this is quite coincidental when the Colombian president is at the White House and the extradition is being done to prove that indeed Colombia is playing its role to end the drug trafficking and then the drug trade that's going on from this country. Colombia, as we've seen from the videos you played, that Petro, they're working so hard, their security agencies are working so hard to end the drug trade. And every country, I would say, is playing a major role to do this. But to accuse the president of being part of it, to accuse the president of benefiting from this, well, that's a different level of diplomacy. And
yeah, I mean, Trump basically said he was a drug dealer. He said Petro was a drug dealer, right? The same as he said Maduro was the head of the cartel of the Suns. You know, very, very direct accusations, as usual. Not really too much evidence that he produced to support that. Although, of course, Maduro is in court. Maybe we will see some.
That court case is going to be very interesting, and I hope we're going to have it live than being in private. And I'm seeing this trend of Trump calling out leaders ending very soon. I believe Trump is learning a lot of lessons. Trump is seeing a lot of the backlash that the US is getting, and I'm sure the US is also feeling some heat because even Americans themselves are fighting against the ICE raids. They are fighting against the government. They are fighting against the vice president. They are fighting against some congressmen and congresswomen for supporting some of the things that the Trump administration is doing. So some of these fights and this pressure from within America itself is getting the government to back down on some of the actions that they've pushed forward to maintain some of the things that they are saying is not supposed to happen, like drugs, like immigration. And recently we've had, I mean, the Minnesota government or the people of Minnesota are fighting against the ICE raids. People of New York are fighting against it. And if everybody gets up to fight against ICE, then what will Trump do? He's going to unleash the military of the US to go fight Americans? I doubt that's going to happen. So this is a time to have dialogue. This is a time to have conversations. This is a time diplomacy would have to work. And I'm sure that will bring more peace in the world than what we are seeing right now.
And I mean, it's important to remember that, as always, domestic policy has a big impact on foreign policy. You mentioned, you know, Donald Trump's got his eyes on the midterms. He's had some negative approval ratings. You know, maybe that's why he's decided to pull back a little bit on these threats against Colombia and instead invite the president over, have a discussion with him, you know, temporarily lift those sanctions on him, maybe tone down that aggressive rhetoric. The meeting, as we mentioned, being held behind closed doors. Looking at the live stream right now, I can see a guard outside the White House, a lot of reporters, but no news, nothing yet coming out. And again, that maybe suggests it's a diplomatic meeting. And Petro, of course, himself also has, Petro himself also has elections coming up. He's not going to be standing, but he does have his preferred successor who he wants to put on a good position, put in a good position in those elections coming up in the second half of this year. And, you know, he really wants to show that he can do business with the US, because one of the criticisms of the left in Colombia is they can't partner with the US. We need the US as an ally in the war on drugs. These guys on the left, they can't work with them. All they can do is throw insults. Now, Petro today has an opportunity to prove that is not true.
Yes, that's really a big opportunity. And this is something he's been saying over and over again since December, since Trump started hurling all the accusations against him. He's been saying that they are looking to get an invitation from the White House where they could show and prove that all the things that have been said is not true. And he also backtracked and said, well, they are not going to the White House, and that Trump has to come to Colombia to see for himself some of the works that he's done against the drug trafficking in the country. Yes, Petro is someone who likes to be unprecedented, I would say. He likes to be the first to do so many things. He's the first left wing president of Colombia. And to have a left wing as a leader in all the centuries that Colombia has been in existence, then you know that indeed the people need a change and they voted for a change. So with the elections coming up, he doesn't show that he's hungry for power. He's rather showing hunger for change in Colombia. And for him to even accept the invitation or even the phone call of President Trump, it says a lot. It says that indeed they want to have a conversation. He could equally have said he wouldn't meet Trump, and we've seen that before. He could have also said, hey, he's going to continue his counterattacks towards Trump as well. But that has ceased. That means that there's diplomacy at play. That means that we're going to have some kind of a good news rather than a banter after this meeting, hopefully. And you can't just expect nothing, but definitely something is going to happen. And we are yet to hear that the meeting has not started yet, and we don't have much information. Everybody is waiting, the whole world is waiting to see how that meeting is going to go. And I mean, a positive reaction or a positive result from that meeting is going to go a long way to affect the rest of the countries in the South American region, because all these countries have almost the same problem. They all have drug problems. They all have some leadership problems, which the U.S. government is a bit uncertain about. We've seen Venezuela already, and there's going to be a court case with Maduro, so we don't know how that is going to go. Now it's Colombia's turn. However, with Colombia's diplomacy, well, we're yet to see Peru, we're yet to see Ecuador, and then the other countries in the South American region who all have either some form of militias or some drug trade ongoing that is affecting the rest of the region and the image that they have. And all of them also have security agencies that are up to task. However, they are regions with a lot of population, a lot of forest area, and a lot of vegetation. And it's so hard to go after a lot of militia or a lot of drug barons and drug peddlers who sometimes use the communities around and use all the support from the people they support to go into hiding, and it makes it very difficult. In as much as this is happening, we also know that a lot of powerful people sometimes join these people are sponsored or sponsor some of these trades, and none so far has been mentioned with the back and forth except presidents of the countries, and that is really the highest level of accusation we've ever seen ever in the politics of the world.
Yeah. Ishmael, and we haven't got any pictures yet from the meeting. We haven't really got any news at all. What we do have is some pictures from some demonstrations which took place in Bogota in Colombia today. Let's see if we can see some of those. Yep. So these are people who are coming out in support of President Petro. So they are there to say, look, we believe in our president. We feel that he is in the right. He's taking the fight to Donald Trump. We want to see more of this. And, he's our leader and we're proud of him. And you mentioned earlier, I think, that it has been quite a popular move from him to take on Trump and to take this very strong position against Trump. And it's gained him support in his own country. It's gained him support in some of the neighboring countries as well, and actually around the world, and like you said, in the global south. And so, like I said, these are pictures from Bogota today of people waving Colombian flags, holding up banners in support of Petro, giving him a send-off as he went over to the US to meet Donald Trump.
That's quite interesting. And you will see this always with the South American nations. They always come out to support their leaders. And we saw that with Venezuela, where after Maduro was picked up by the U.S. For the alleged crimes, I mean, drug trafficking and peddling. A lot of Venezuelans came out to speak against it. The acting president is also she's playing a very complex role because she's seen also as someone who is listening to the US, but she comes out to also speak against the US for the kind of intrusion that we are seeing in their own governance. And we are waiting for the election to take place in Venezuela. And we've also seen the issues of Machado being first, looking like the one who is supposed to, or who is going to have the upper hand when she comes back into Venezuela. We also saw Donald Trump speaking against some of the issues around the Nobel Peace Prize and all of that. And indeed, these are very interesting times because a lot of the things that are happening are just unprecedented.
Yep, and a reminder today, you are watching Global South World. So we're live. We're waiting for updates on Gustavo Petro, the Colombian president's meeting with Donald Trump at the White House. At the moment, we don't know whether we're going to get a picture from there. The word currently is that it will be closed to the press. I can see on the live stream that there are a number of journalists gathered outside the White House, but there is no sign of either of the two leaders. The White House YouTube channel also at the moment is not showing any feed from the event, which suggests that it is still ongoing. Will it be good news? If there's good news, perhaps there might be a press conference. But for the moment, we don't know. What we can do, however, is we can go back into the backstory between these two leaders, and we can have a look at some of the comments that Donald Trump made about Gustavo Petro back in December when the two were, let's say, not the best of friends.
Have you considered talking to the president of Colombia, who you call a drug dealer?
No, I haven't really thought too much about him. He's been fairly hostile to the United States, and I haven't given him a lot of thought. He's going to have himself some big problems if he doesn't wise up. Colombia is producing a lot of drugs. They have cocaine factories that they make cocaine, as you know, and they sell it right into the United States. So he better wise up, or he'll be next. He'll be next too. And I hope he's listening. He's going to be next.
So yeah, that was Donald Trump speaking after the U.S. forces dragged Nicolas Maduro from his home in Venezuela, saying that Colombia's president Gustavo Petro would be next. And Petro didn't take that lying down. His reaction really was to accuse Donald Trump of being ignorant and to point out how many Colombians have died in the war on drugs, contrasting that with the situation in America. Here, let's have a listen to what he said back in December.
Quien cumplió con los requisitos establecidos para tal efecto. Por segunda vez.
Y aquí estamos siendo amenazados. Y a Colombia no se le amenaza. Porque cuánta sangre de ustedes o de la Policía Nacional y de los colombianos del común y de los que no son del común, porque cuántos líderes de este país no han muerto en manos del narcotráfico. Como para que nos vengan a decir hoy que es que no estamos luchando contra el narcotráfico y aquí hay un cartel de los soles.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Como seres humanos se dialoga, no bajo amenaza. Que aquí hemos puesto sangre por litros. ¿Cuánta sangre sería? Nadie ha calculado eso, terrible número. Sangre y sangre por luchar contra el narcotráfico desde hace medio siglo. Para que los berracos gringos no se metan tanta cocaína en la cabeza. Y entonces las gracias son un insulto. No, no tienen por qué insultarnos. Allá no han muerto, aquí sí. 1 millón de latinoamericanos muertos desde hace medio siglo es en esas guerras que ha desatado las mafias creadas por prohibir. Y entonces han empoderado a las mafias.
So we're still waiting for any news from the press conference between Gustavo Petro and Donald Trump, which is taking place at the White House, we believe, as we speak. You are watching Global South World live. Ishmael, so can you tell us, just give us a brief overview, what are we expecting the two leaders to be discussing today?
Well, the two leaders are meeting in the White House, and it's a closed meeting. And so these types of meetings are opened up for the cameras, but this time is not. And we are expecting both leaders to focus on security, cooperation, and counter narcotics, according to the White House. And the U.S. president has earlier accused Colombia of allowing the flow of illegal narcotics into the U.S. And then the Colombian leader has also accused the U.S. of having too big of a military footprint in the region, and has called the abduction of the Venezuelan leader a kidnapping. So anything is possible. What we do know is that this is about finding a point of intersection and cooperation. And we should point out it's about pushing a hard reset on these relations, given the fact that Colombia typically has been a U.S. ally, and now with all these back and forth between Trump and Petro, we saw a little bit of a dip in their relations, but this is a way to revive the relations and for Petro to also show some data and some truth, as he said in the videos, to the White House and show them that indeed they are fighting against the drug trade, and he has no hand in the cocaine dealings and the cocaine business in Colombia. And Trump as well would also show if there are any data that he has to Petro, and we will know this after the meeting has been had.
Yeah, Trump's a great one, isn't he, for ambushing leaders when they come. We can't forget the video he showed to Ramaphosa, the South African president, when he came with his claims about white genocide. It's very easy to imagine that he's got something to pull out on the Colombian president. But the fact that the meeting is behind closed doors, there isn't an obvious kind of ambush planned, or at least not a public ambush, which I think is very important, because a lot of the dealings between these two men have been done in public. And that's perhaps been one of the difficulties in the relationship, is that the communication's been so often been through the media rather than directly. And as you mentioned, it was that phone call. Petro said that Donald Trump called him early in January, and that seems to have reset the relationship and seems to have brought the two men to an understanding that they can perhaps work out their differences, and rather than shouting at each other and threatening each other, they can look at what they can do to collaborate together. And we've seen Colombia take some more measures in wiping out drugs crops. We've seen them accepting a deportation flight from the US. And they in turn have called on the US to help them by tackling the financial networks that support the drug cartels in their country, by tackling some of the leaders overseas. And they have also agreed, you were mentioning, Ishmael, to extradite let's say he's a suspected drug cartel leader to the US.
Yes, exactly. And this was announced by the defense minister of Colombia, and this comes at a time when Colombian president is meeting Trump. And this alone is a big message that they are sending across, that they are going to work with the US to get all the drug traffickers out of Colombia to justice. And we've seen that happen now. So clearly there is some alliance between Colombia and the US. What we are seeing between the two leaders doesn't reflect on what's happening on the ground. US Marshals, the DEA, they are all in Colombia as well, working with the Colombian authorities to get some of the alleged criminals out of the system and out of the country.
Yeah, I'm just watching for any updates on the live feed we're seeing from the White House. We can see a Marine standing guard outside the door. We can see lots of members of the press are also there. But what we don't see is either of the two leaders. And to be honest, we don't know if we will see those leaders either. One thing which we can see, and we have got some pictures of, and I've just got a new picture that's dropped in just in the last couple of minutes from the march in Bogota, which is in support of Colombian president. Here it is. That's the new photo that's just come in. And these people, these Colombians, are coming out to express their support for Gustavo Petro, his position towards the US president, which has been a very aggressive one, as we've discussed. And they obviously feel that he is standing up for them and for their nation. So Ishmael, we don't know how long this meeting is going to take, do we? So we don't know whether we're expecting any news at the end of it. There might be a press conference, there might not be. But what we can say is what the US said that would be discussed before the meeting. And what was that?
So they're going to discuss counter-narcotic strategies between the two, and also they're going to discuss their relations between the two countries. So basically, this is a bilateral meeting, and this is not a meeting to fight over who is selling what and who is leading which criminal organization. And it's not anything that would call hostile. This is more like a friendly meeting. The tensions died down after that phone call in December, and right after that, a few weeks ago, right after that, it created this new relationship, new alliance that we're seeing between the two countries, and all of it is going to come out after the meeting that will be had maybe in a few minutes to come.
Yep. Thank you, Ishmael. And I think while we're waiting to hear, I think it is worth just taking another look at the comments that's made this meeting so interesting, which is the exchange of insults between those two leaders back in December. This is Donald Trump.
Have you considered talking to the president of Colombia, whom you call a drug dealer?
No, I haven't really thought too much about him. He's been fairly hostile to the United States, and I haven't given him a lot of thought. He's going to have himself some big problems if he doesn't wise up. Colombia is producing a lot of drugs. They have cocaine factories that they make cocaine, as you know, and they sell it right into the United States. So he better wise up, or he'll be next. He'll be next too. And I hope he's listening. He's going to be next.
So yes, Donald Trump saying he's going to be next, of course, referring to the US operation to capture and kidnap, as Petro called it, his neighbor, Nicolas Maduro, and then saying that Petro will be next. And, Petro's response, of course, was to say, well, look, Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about.
Trump es un hombre muy desinformado de Colombia. Es una lástima porque desecha el país que más sabe de tráfico de cocaína. Parece que sus interlocutores lo engañan por completo.
Toneladas equivalen más o menos a unos 32.000.
Son 2.700 toneladas de cocaína incautadas por mi gobierno. Hasta ahora. Se está haciendo va a terminar el año 2025 y todavía nos quedan meses del 26, así que vamos a aproximarnos a 4.000 toneladas. La mayor incautación de la historia del mundo. No hay un récord de estos atrás.
Y cada 40 minutos se destruye uno.
Cada 40. Esa desinformación terrible hacia el presidente de los Estados Unidos lo lleva a frases y acciones que no se pueden ejercer sobre un presidente elegido democráticamente por la mayoría de la sociedad colombiana. Así se irrespeta esa Colombia. Tengo opiniones diferentes a las políticas del gobierno estadounidense sobre Palestina, migrantes, Caribe, Venezuela y la eficacia de la lucha contra las mafias. En una democracia global tengo derecho a expresarlas y controvertir. Si me demuestran con datos mi equivocación, puedo corregir. Por eso ya no espero que me inviten a Washington, sino que Trump venga a Colombia a ver qué son laboratorios de cocaína, cómo se destruyen 9 al día y cómo incautamos drogas por decenas de toneladas todos los días. Pero no es cierto que con misiles sobre lancheros se está luchando contra narcoterroristas. Cuando los lancheros son gente pobre y cuando no hay mar internacional en el Caribe, yo quiero aquí la Cancillería que mire esto. Porque nosotros tenemos fronteras de nuestro mar territorial con los países, las islas que siguen, y los países de Centroamérica. ¿Dónde hay mar internacional, ministro, en el Caribe? Donde se ponga y donde caiga un misil es el mar de alguien. Y la mayor parte de ese mar es colombiano.
So you are watching Global South World. We are here waiting for news from Gustavo Petro, who you saw just then, and his meeting with Donald Trump, who we saw earlier threatening to kick his ass. But it seems that that meeting may actually be a little bit more diplomatic than perhaps we might have expected back in December. However, it's not clear whether the press will get access, whether there will be a press conference or not. We are live, so if you have any views, opinions, questions, please put them into the comments. I can see a few people there hailing Donald Trump's war on drugs and saying that perhaps this is something that the Democrats should have done themselves. Also some support for his suggestion that the Cuban regime is going to be the next to crumble. Obviously, that's been a thorn in the side of the Americans, having this socialist, communist regime just across the sea ever since the 1960s, when, of course, President Kennedy tried to invade the island. It's been something that American presidents have been very, very unhappy about. Obviously, Cuba having close relations with the Soviet Union, obviously close relations with other socialist countries in Latin America as well. We saw 32, I think, Cubans were killed in that raid on Venezuela, in which President Maduro was captured by American forces. So that, access of left-wing opposition, let's say, to America is very much under threat, with Maduro gone, with Cuba under a lot of pressure. And Petro, was in a way part of that access. He's now talking to Donald Trump in the White House, and we'll see how that meeting's going. But as I said, please do leave your comments, and I hope you're enjoying our coverage on Global South World. So Ishmael, you've been looking, I think, at a bit of the history between these two countries, the US and Colombia, and particularly some of the political situation with the guerrilla groups in Colombia. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, well, Colombia has had a very long history of guerrilla warfare, and in the past, that's around 1958, we had the Labour Party, which is the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. So Colombia is made up of the Liberals, the Conservatives, and then we now have the left wing, who are from the Labour Party, and the left wing are seeking social democracy. The Labour Party is seeking reforms, and the Conservatives just want to maintain the order, the old order, where we had the few rich people ruling against the majority of those who are really in service. So this is about land, basically. So those owning the land are just a little below 1% own majority of the lands in Colombia. And this is something that the left-wing president, Gustavo Petro, sees as very biased and not democratic socially, and is fighting hard to change that status quo. And since the 1970s, when there was an election, there was the National Front, which is a joint or two-party system between the Liberals and Conservatives. And this brought about ANAPO, which is a National Popular Alliance that was against the two-party system. It was fed up with the two-party system. And also we had a few guerrilla groups, which are the communist groups like the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, and then the National Liberation Army, ELN. And these groups also came out of the elections, and they are from the countryside, which they feel they are not being taken care of developmentally, and everything is stuck in Bogota, which is the capital of Colombia. And we've seen the first left-wing president, Gustavo Petro, being elected in 2022. Clearly, it says the direction of the sentiments of the people. It also it tells you that a lot of countries are getting fed up with the regular or the norm of getting either the rightists or even the centrists in power. And now they're going for the left. And if we want to count the number of left-leaning governments globally, the number is increasing. It's increasing. We have more than 30% of countries globally getting towards the left. And elections that are being held are going in favor of those in the left or those who are closer to the left. We've seen this in so many countries in Africa, in Asia, and it's also spreading now even in Europe, in France, and even in the UK. You can see from the voting pattern is going towards those who are for the people, who are focusing more on some form of socialist or leaning towards some social systems. And you can see even in the United States where Trump himself is more, it's with the Republican Party. That's more, what was the term they call the Republicans? They are
GOP, the Grand Old Party.
Yes, and now they are being accused of also picking up some socialist policies, like dealing with issues around food and also healthcare and all these. Even though they are breaking down some of the policies that have been in place, but they are bringing new policies that are almost the same, but they just look different, but they are almost the same thing. So most people are leaning towards that side. Yes, the rich cannot be richer forever. Because the poor are getting poorer, and it's best to either get them in the middle by having some form of equitable share of national wealth, and to fight against drug or the war against drugs is also one way to get people to stay off some of these addictive drugs that are killing a lot of people, and also to get people to use or take advantage of the better healthcare in countries, also get better systems and be able to work to look after their families and to reduce the crime rate, because drug trafficking and also drug business normally goes with a high crime rate, and countries that have serious drug issues also have high crime problems. And one typical country is the United States. Trump has said he's going to fight against drugs, and the fight is quite a difficult one, because at the end of the day, you are seeing a lot of people who are at the suffering from the effects of it rather than they bringing it. So they are addicted to it, they are buying it, and they are dying. But to go to the core of it, you need to look at your borders. You need to look at some of the gangs and then the crime bosses and those who are in charge of crime in these countries. They normally manage how the flow of the drugs. But now Trump wants to go beyond borders to deal with the drugs from where he believes the drugs are coming from the most. And if they are coming from Colombia and other South American country, for him, with his policies, his thinking, if you deal with these countries, then you deal with the drug problem in the United States. But I mean, clearly, it's not the entire truth, because dealing with Colombia, well, it doesn't mean the drugs cannot be brought from other places. We've seen the poppy coming from Afghanistan, where they're creating heroines and other drugs. We've seen other countries also growing the coca plant.
Yeah, and fentanyl is very important, isn't it? And Trump said he thinks that's coming from China. It's certainly a lot of it coming in through Mexico. And that's what some of these South American leaders have said, is that, you know, it isn't cocaine coming from Colombia or Venezuela, which is killing thousands of Americans. It's actually fentanyl. But I think you make a really good point that the domestic political scene plays out in these international meetings. Trump looking very much ahead to the midterm elections. His ratings not doing so well. Petro also looking ahead to a presidential election in Colombia later this year. He will be hoping to give a boost to his party ahead of those by showing that he can stand up to Donald Trump. Now, I've been looking at the feeds. There is no sign of any press conference coming up soon, Ishmael. So I think we will take a break. We will be back if we see any sign of a press conference. Don't worry, we'll be back here on Global South World. We're also going to have some reactions from Colombia, from journalists within the country who've been following these events, what they think in the aftermath of this meeting. So please do stay tuned. Global South World. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and of course, globalsouthworld.com. Thank you very much for being with us.